and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast. I'm your host, John Hart, and I'll be joined by a very special guest, John Shortell, where we'll be talking about supporting neurodivergent musicians. I'll let him introduce himself in a sec, but each episode is broken up into a traffic light format where we'll share insights in the red section, improvise babble in the amber, and a recommendation or tip you might find handy in the green. So, John, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, man. It's, obviously we've been communicating and we had the blog come out for Musicians Union, but it's always nice to speak face to face. And it's two neurodivergents as well. And for anyone listening to this, I've had some guests on who are not neurodivergents, and it's been very linear. These kind of conversations, I get excited about because we can just go into, we were just saying before, we can go into so many different rabbit holes, but we can often end up apologizing to each other before we even go into it. But actually, it's just like, it's so refreshing to be able to go, well, if I cut you up or you cut me up, that's part of the parcel. So there might be we might have crossover conversations throughout it, but I just think that's just the natural way.
Let's see where it goes, isn't it?
Yeah. So, John, just tell us about yourself and obviously MU and everything.
Yeah, so I'm head of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion at the Musicians Union. I've been at the MU now doing this job for 5 years, I think it is. So my work spans four main areas properly. So LGBT musicians, disabled musicians, and that includes neurodivergent musicians. I'll talk about that a little bit actually, about why we do that, because people always ask. But anyway, musicians who experience racism, so our global majority musicians, and women musicians as well. So they're like my four main work areas. And then I look after the Safe Space Service, which is a reporting service for anyone who experiences sexual harassment or abuse in the music industry. And then cutting through all the work is like the socioeconomic perspective as well, because I don't think you can look at any of those four strands without considering socioeconomic impact as well, especially on something like music education. So that's kind of the bulk of what I do. And it stretches from work on policy to, like I was just telling you before we come on, yesterday I was in Parliament giving evidence to an oral inquiry on misogyny in music. It's quite broad and wide-reaching, which is why I like the job and why I think it's good for someone who is neurodivergent, because you're doing something different constantly, which is a blessing and a curse, really, isn't it?
Isn't that neurodivergent?
It is, isn't it?
Sometimes.
Like, sometimes you thrive off structure, and sometimes you love it when there's a million things happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that's a proper overview of what I do, and I've got a colleague who I work with as well called Diljit, who works in my department, and she's fantastic. So she supports me in everything I do. We support each other in everything we do. She's quite a new addition to the team. She's been here since October. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Amazing. And I suppose, has the department been in place since you started, or was it in place like before, like sort of 5 years ago, or was this kind of relatively new thing that's kind of,
It used to be in place, right? It used to be in place. So I used to work at the NU, and I'd done a job that was education and equalities official. So it was like half and half. It was supposed to be half and half, but the education bit meant like a lot of casework, which is like reactive. So if cases are coming in from members, that's your priority. So the EDI work kind of weren't as robust as I wanted it to be. Let's say you never really got to spend as much time on it, and that was a real issue for me, because that is obviously my passion and where I wanted my career to go. So I left and went and worked for another trade union doing EDI, just EDI as a full-time job. And then the MU made an EDI role full-time. So we'll come back and interviewed for that. And then, since I've been back 5 years ago, I would say that was the start of the department, as it were, as we see it now, which was good because it was like starting from scratch. So in a way, we could make it whatever we wanted. We could really respond to what was happening right then in the music industry. But then at the same time, like, oh God, I wish someone would give me a steer on like where to start or what I'm supposed to be doing here. But no, it's going well. It's going well. Lots to do, as you can imagine.
I mean, the climate with, all the strands that you've been talking about there. I mean, I can imagine it's exploding in so many different areas all the time, which is amazing. Obviously, all the awareness is kicking in, and COVID. I can imagine COVID probably exploded a lot of things, especially with mental health and especially neurodiversity and all those areas.
You know what? Well, I mean, it wasn't good for this, but COVID for me, right, kind of made everyone aware of the issues that underrepresented groups had. So when we look at Black and global majority communities, and remember that was big to report with, it was like COVID's, what's the word I'm looking for? COVID's having a disproportionate impact on this community, and suddenly people started to ask questions. Well, why? What is it about this community that makes them more susceptible to COVID? And it was looking at like the working conditions, the housing conditions of each of the different communities. For me, it was like a good way to start having those conversations about, well, this was happening before COVID. It's only now we're discussing it because COVID's kind of laid it bare for us. Same with disabled community, when disabled musicians have been saying, for an example, we could rehearse online because the space isn't accessible or something like that. And previous to COVID, people would be like, oh, I didn't think we could rehearse online. I don't know whether it worked. Then comes COVID and we're all rehearsing online and it worked. I'm not saying it worked perfectly.
No.
It wasn't a good time for anyone, was it? But it can be done. So those conversations were interesting, how quickly they opened up and how quickly we adapted to new ways of working. So what's the word? Kind of leveraging that. To be like, okay, now we know it can be done. Let's look at how we refine it and how we use it for different communities and see if that can make the industry a bit more accessible. And in some ways it has, in some ways it's gone back to normal a bit, hasn't it?
It has. And I think, I mean, like now, I mean, I don't know if I've done a podcast episode, if we would have turned up and done it in a room and just, done a recording, but I think it forced, especially, online communication and things as well. It's forced the issue of we've got to get these things in place, and which has kind of obviously rolled the ball of so many other areas. It's changed my job like significantly because I'm not touring as much at the moment, but I'm kind of trying to set up all the stuff at home, but having communications now and actually meeting people like yourself over Zoom. It's been a game changer in that area. So I suppose, did you have a music background, or was it more of the background in every other area that you were talking about?
Yeah, so I trained as an actor. I went to the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, so we've done that for a while. And then I carried on a little bit and done a master's in sociology over at Goldsmiths.
Right.
And was looking, specifically at like political performance and underrepresented performance as like a force for political change. But instead of music, I looked at performance art just because I thought it was a really interesting medium and one that kind of hasn't got the same conventions as different ones, as different other mediums. So that was kind of, obviously, I've always been interested in like equalities. As a gay guy, it's something that I've always been interested in that kind of social movement for acceptance and equality. And then doing that MA really solidified what I wanted to do and where I wanted to work within the arts, but within an EDI role. That was where I found out I was neurodivergent, when I was doing my masters. It wasn't until then. Yeah.
So you were, sorry, what was the masters in again?
Sociology, really. It's got like a weird title. It was called like Performance and Culture, Socio-Cultural Perspective, something like that. Something what academics talk like, what I didn't really talk like. But basically, it was sociology, but looking at it through the lens of performance.
And obviously, in that, how did you feel when you were doing that research? But then it's almost like you're researching something externally, but then you're having to then go into a research internally. Did you go into that kind of space of like, I'm now in internal research because learning out about neurodivergence and it's like I was diagnosed dyslexic when I was back at uni, but in my early 20s, you're just like, I don't care about that. I just want to be a music career and stuff as well. Obviously now a lot older, it's just like, right, I want to figure out how to unlock whatever it is that's holding me back and all these other stuff. But I don't know, did you have that process, that experience where it's, because it can be painful when you're like, you just get these discovery or get this awareness and then obviously getting the diagnosis and all this other stuff. I don't know. Yeah. What was your experience of that?
You know what? It made a lot of sense looking back at things. If that is clear, like when having the diagnosis, for some people it's helpful, for some people it's not. For me, it was helpful to understand potentially why I do things in a certain way. But in classic neurodivergent style, it was like getting the diagnosis and then like, oh, okay, then and hopping on to the next thing for me. So it was helpful, and I got loads of support when I was doing my masters, which was a game changer because I would have failed that masters completely without that support.
Yeah.
So just simple things like how to structure an argument properly, or when I think I'm talking and something's making sense and the other person's like, I'm struggling to pick out what your points are. They're there. You know what it's like, don't you? When it's like someone can't catch the thread of your conversation, but to you, it makes perfect sense. So learning them, I guess, tricks or skills to be able to think, okay, is that the best way to explain stuff? All those things are really useful. I don't know. It feels like so long ago that I was doing it.
Yeah, and I suppose you know, dyslexia when I first had it, it was big, and then now it's just become that. It's just part of you know who I am, and I suppose these other things now come. But you're right, when it's given me much more clarity into like, oh wow, okay, you know, I'm not sure if you know I had it when I was younger, especially during school and things as well. You know, there's always that sliding doors moments and what ifs and stuff, but I don't think I've been able to achieve what I did had I, you know, had I not had it and all this other stuff as well. So sort of leads on to supporting neurodivergent musicians with MU. How has that process been? And yeah, well, obviously when you started 5 years ago and where it is now at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, when it started about 5 years ago, the term weren't used as widely. Like neurodiverse people, we'd talk about a specific impairment, or so you'd say like, oh, dyslexia or dyscalculia or ADHD or whatever we were talking about. But now it's become more like neurodivergent is that umbrella term, hasn't it? Yeah. Which I think is particularly useful, if I'm honest with you. And I don't know whether it's my own paranoia or whether I think there's a bit of both here, right? Because when you say to someone, so, oh, I've got ADHD, people have preconceived ideas about what someone with ADHD
stigma, or that kind of, it's like a preconceived stigma.
Even if it's not conscious, if it's like, so they'll think certain things about a person with ADHD or dyslexia, won't they? When all those things might or might not be true of that person. You have individual traits, don't you? It's not like we all act the same or you all think the same. It's a broad spectrum, isn't it, of like of things. So generally, that's why I'll say like I'm neurodiverse and won't be specific about what that means, because it doesn't matter. If I tell you I'm neurodiverse, I guess all you need to know is the things I might need to do my job. So I come from that perspective, like, yeah, I'm neurodiverse and I'm probably going to need extra time. If you're asking me to do A, B, or C, or if you're asking me to do anything with numbers, good luck, because it may as well be like, I don't know, hieroglyphics. It's like, do you know what I mean? But like, so I'll need extra support in these areas, but you don't necessarily need to understand what my impairment is to give me the support. Like, you know, broadly what I'm talking about is with the things I need. That it's the social, I guess it was the social model of disability thinking that got me more thinking of those lines, where it's like, oh yeah, what we need to look at is the barriers, not necessarily what my impairment is. So if we can talk about the barriers, that's going to be more useful to me.
That it's
I answered your question again if I just went off on.
No, it's super, because this is why I love this, because my mantra for this year was focus on my strengths, outsource my weaknesses, and not in a way that I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do any of that.
No.
I just mean I've been, like you said with numbers, I've been plugging away for years and years and years, and it's just not getting any better. Or, you know, there's some areas and stuff as well, and some of the neurodivergents can creatively work around it.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It then flows into all my strengths. If I'm focusing so much on my weaknesses, and then when I get around to my strengths, I'm just too exhausted to do this. Then there's no productivity, and there's, you know, and so I suppose it's explaining to people like that. It's just like, look, I'm not rubbish. I'm not incompetent. I'm not other things as well. I'm just not very good at that. And I think if you kind of go out and you're like, you know, some people can be all rounders. Some people can do all of these things and stuff as well. It's just like, I just, you know, and I suppose it takes that process. It takes that strength to be able to go, do you know what? I just can't. But I run my own business.
Sometimes you want to be in an environment in the workplace where you feel comfortable, don't you? And that's not always the case, is it? Like, we find that a lot, where it's like, it's not really a culture where you can disclose. So you'll find musicians, especially, just getting their heads down and really struggling in some cases. And we're saying to them, you should be asking for what you need. We can help you ask you for what you need. But I completely understand that you're not always in that situation where you feel able to. That's a massive issue, I think, for the music industry, is that culture of disclosure through disability more broadly, not just neurodiversity, like creating those spaces where you're able to ask for what you need because you've got a disability, because you're disabled or you've got an impairment. Yeah, it doesn't always happen. Sorry, you asked me about support at the end.
No, do you know what? No. But it's the same, 'cause the only way I got support is I went through crises, and I was like,
Okay.
it got to the crisis point, and it's such a, you know, I mean, there's a generational thing, but there's such a musician way of just like, no, it's fine. I'll just keep going. I'll keep touring. I'll keep going and going and going and going and going. Oh, I won't go to the doctors now. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. Keep calm, carry on until it cracks, and then it smashes, and then you're just like, crap. I could, if I'd done this 10 years ago, could I have avoided this? But I mean, you know, I'm trying to see sort of somewhat of the positive side of, oh, I've now gone into the ground. Now I'm starting to build back up. But I think with the support, especially the MU, I've seen, you know, I speak to a lot of my music mates, and they have no awareness that it's there. That if they are struggling, the struggle also in the music industry is almost, it's like a badge of honor, of like not a badge of honor, but like a thing you carry around. It's like, oh, it's just the norm. Yeah, it's just a struggle. It's just part of the norm. And have you found a lot more musicians in the last few years have come to the MU for help?
Yeah, 100%. Because people are getting the language and the confidence to be able to talk about it a lot more. So this is the reason why I guess we're having this conversation today, is because of that, isn't it? Because people are being more open about what they need to do the jobs, and I love that. And we'll always support people to be able to do that. So the support that we offer for neurodivergent musicians specifically, we've been doing bits, but we've known that we need to build it, because anecdotally, I know from speaking to our members, we've got a high percentage of members who are neurodiverse, and there's research that supports that from like AFEM, with Tristan Hunt has done research on this, and we've got research coming soon from the musician census that will have data on neurodiversity on. So I'll share that with you when it's published. But basically, we've been having these conversations for a while. We had a members conference last October, and it was completely dedicated to equality, diversity, inclusion. And one of the sessions was on neurodiversity. It was a member on our executive committee, Anna, who was really pushing for it as a neurodiverse person. She was like, right, we need to do more about this. So she was really pushing that session. So we were like, yeah, of course, let's do this. So we got Dr. Tony Lloyd from ADHD Foundation was part of the session, and Tristan Hunt, who we've just mentioned, who's an ADHD coach working in the music industry specifically. And he's worked in the music industry for years. He's a lovely guy, fantastic at what he does. So they ran the session, and the sessions were all designed to be like, okay, let's talk about issues, but we have half a session on issue and half a session and half the session on action. So here's the problem, but what are we going to do about it? Because that's what I like. And I don't know if you find this, being neurodiverse, I love it when someone gives me like a direct thing to do rather than talks around an issue. It's like, this is the issue, this is what I want to do about it. That's music to my ears. Or when someone sends me an email in bullet points, perfect for me, because I can just say exactly what you want me to do without all
they're
the
speaking in your language.
Exactly.
And also they've taken the time, because most of the time we have to adapt to the neurotypical world, which is obviously a huge percentage. If we've been living in this neurotypical world for years and years and years, and having to adapt to the language, having to adapt to certain things. When you're right, when someone sends that email, or in a way where it's just like, oh my goodness, this is you're allowing me to unmask here and just be able to just relax, rather than it, you know, put the mask back on, carry on as it is. And I suppose, and that's the coping mechanisms, I suppose, that we're gradually building out, and the awareness of it's okay. I mean, I've been using things like ChatGPT and things like that, but because and AI, and a lot of people are fearful of it, but I'm like, this is, for me, it's an incredible neurodivergent tool, because I struggle to send emails, and I could be sitting there for ages. But if it's like, revise this, do it really quickly or something, it allows me to communicate to a neurotypical without me coming across as convoluted and all over the place. But when I do speak to someone else who's neurodiverse, it's just like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to send it as it is. you know, everything will be all over the place, but
they'll get it.
We're on the same.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's funny that because like, you can kind of tell as well sometimes, can't you? I know from emailing other neurodiverse people, and sometimes I'll apologize and they'll be like, "Don't apologize, this is fine for me." And it's like, oh, like you've just said, it's you feel a bit more relaxed then, don't you? Because you're like, oh, it's fine. They're not going to be like spotting every spelling mistake or a comma's not in the right place, or they won't think I'm being short with them. They kind of understand like I'm just being direct because this is the easiest way for me to communicate. I'm not being short or funny with you or anything, but you literally getting on my brains thinking in an email, which is just quicker, isn't it? But the members conference come out with these actions, and there was multiple actions for us to look at. But the one big one was to create a neurodiversity hub. So the MU would become like kind of a central place for where our members and the wider music community could go to get bits of advice on neurodiversity. So whether that was you as a neurodiverse musician yourself, or you were working with neurodiverse musicians or teaching neurodiverse musicians. So we thought that, okay, so that's the first action that we're going to do, because that space doesn't really exist in the industry at the moment. There's bits like everywhere, but we can pull them together through the MU. So that's what we're working on currently. We've been working on it for a while, and the hub will have like advice on routes to diagnosis, managing neurodiverse burnout, the lived experience kind of blog pieces like the one that you done for us, so people can begin to understand what it's kind of like to be neurodiverse, or for other neurodiverse people reading them to think like, oh my God, that's so reflective of my lived experience. And then signposting as well, so to other resources that exist out there. And we've done a lot of work with Dr. Tony Lloyd from the ADHD Foundation. We've done a series of 4 workshops on like introduction to neurodiversity, and they've covered a range of topics, so they'll be accessible on the hub as well. And that's kind of what we're starting with. And then we're going to build it out from there. So looking at specific aspects of neurodiversity. And like I said, there's advice that Tristan's put together for us on working with neurodiverse musicians and how we manage that in a kind of, or how we accommodate people. Manage is probably the wrong word. How we look at reasonable adjustments that are going to work in environments where musicians work, because it's not going to be the same if you like me, if you're working in an office. In a way, it's quite easier, isn't it?
Yeah. If you go to a different venue all the time and you haven't got your, you know, you either got sensory overload, you've got social overload, you then haven't got your environment. And the only, again, I was speaking to a neurodivergent musician last night, and he said the only safe place that we feel every time is when we get up on stage, because we've got our guitars, we've got our instruments, we then got our sort of the same sort of setup in any country, in any place that we can go to. But we don't have that in the other environment, and then transport and other areas, or when you're driving or whatever it is. And if you're not able to manage those areas, then when it comes to performance time, that's what you're there for. And you've been affected so much within a few hours before, whatever it is, it is detriment. And I kind of sort of, you know, and I'm loosely sort of looking into it as well. And I think this is the awareness and research into it of, if there is neurodivergent musicians, it's like, what is there blockages? And I don't have the science, and I don't have, you know, maybe it's a degree that I've got to go. I'm in an unofficial degree at the moment of doing it. But there's of like, is that sometimes, especially for neurodivergent musicians, you know, that blockage that's holding you back, you know, that internal chaos, is that affecting your external progress? Time. And I think, I mean, you know, obviously you're speaking to Foundation and Tristan as well, who I know who's amazing. And I think it's those things, like you said, creating that hub, and eventually if there's like things that neurodivergent musicians, very niche, but if they can all come together, it's like, oh wow, I'm in a room of just the same people where we're talking like this. So powerful, because
we have a network, you know, like back to a point I said earlier, the Disabled Members Network that meet regularly online, and they're a group of disabled musicians who are MU members who meet dead casual space. You don't have to be like elected or not, on anyone who identifies as disabled can come. And I'll go back to why it includes neurodiversity as well, and just talk about anything, like issues that impact you as a musician, issues more broadly. And there'll be a member there taking notes, and then they feed it back to me, and then we look at it with our Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Committee and pick out the bits that they want us to work on and see what we can do, if the MU can do anything about them. And it really, those networks have been a game changer in terms of like maybe we would never have heard about this issue unless someone turned up to a network meeting and was like, you know what?
Yeah.
And then other people will be like, oh, that's a common thread, but I just kind of put up with it. Things that you don't need to be putting up with, but we wouldn't necessarily know about it. And we include neurodiversity under that banner because what we're trying to do with that is like the way we've got the LGBT community, there's lots of different identities under that banner. But for us, disabled is a really powerful word in terms of social change. So again, going back to that social model, it's looking at, well, we're only disabled by the things that are put in place. What can we do to remove those barriers? And neurodiversity for us falls under that banner, and we think that more powerful under that banner of disability in having those conversations. I know a lot of neurodiverse people wouldn't necessarily identify as disabled. So we need, when we're talking about it, we're always saying that includes neurodiverse people too, because we think we've got more power when we're talking about collectively about the barriers that prevent us doing our jobs or prevent us accessing spaces as a collective community. Of course, within that, there's space to talk about the specifics. So we'll have like blind musicians who have got specific needs that are going to be totally different to wheelchair users or to neurodivergent musicians. But collectively, essentially what the issue is the barriers, isn't it? And having that conversation. And again, I'm not equating experience of disabled musicians. What I am saying is collectively, I think it's going to be easier to make change if there's more of us having that conversation and understanding each other's barriers. Does that make sense?
And I think, and that's sort of that relative where hurdles is the main, that's whether it's physical or mental hurdles, you know, that is what is stopping me, you know, everyone else in that circle from being able to, you know, progress or to be able to achieve what we want to do and what maybe others are. And I mean, I can't put it down to, you know, oh, is it my neurodivergence that's stopping me from achieving X, Y, and Z? I don't know that, but I think that's a fascinating rabbit hole. I mean, I'm going into that rabbit hole discovery but using that hub and people communicating with each other and reflecting in different ways. I mean, even if it is like, you know, someone who's neurodivergent and someone who is in a wheelchair, you know, what can we go and tell venues? What can we do this that can just accommodate to all of this?
That like solidarity thing as well, isn't it? It's like we're not experiencing the same barriers, but we're experiencing the barriers, and if we're together in that conversation, that's a really powerful message, isn't it? Like and through that network we develop an access rider. Our disabled members were saying like we're not ever asked about access requirements when we're booking gigs or when we're working in studios or whatever environment that you're working in, and it's really difficult for us to communicate our access requirements. So the Disabled Members Network was like, let's create an access rider. So it's a familiar kind of format that musicians use and that people who book musicians use. And it's just one place, a living, breathing document where you can put all your access requirements down, send them when you're booked, and open up that conversation. And that's been really interesting in terms of venues have contacted us and just say, oh, like we obviously are part of the MU. We've been going out to people and said, we'd love you to implement this as part of your booking process. Whenever you book musicians, if you're sending them contracts, send them an access rider and they'll either send it back or they won't if they don't need to. And some festivals have just been like that straight away. Oh, this is a brilliant idea, and just start using it. There's about 6 or 7 now that are using it, and we're in conversations with others to get it implemented. And venues as well, as like, you know what, it's such an easy thing to do.
Because from the musician's point of view, I mean, especially, you know, I can only speak from neurodivergence. It's not something I'd even mention because there's such a sensitive, and then you get RSD, obviously, like rejection sensitive disorder. If they go no, and then you then start, you're not just questioning, you're questioning yourself, and you're questioning yourself as a musician. You're turning up going, oh, you know, and I suppose that is, you know, again, it's that kind of, oh, I'm just gonna struggle on the way here or whatever it is until I get that little hour on stage, and then I come off and I struggle again and things. And it's kind of, you know, that's nice that like breaking down those barriers, but for venues to be able to just go boom and it feel like this sort of immediate communication where it's just like acceptance. It's just isn't it? There's a feeling of like, why is this? Why has that never been like why has that never been the norm if it's like that quick? But you're right, it's just sometimes it takes these things just to open out, and the communication and the awareness and everything as well.
festivals and venues proactively asking about it. And Attitude is Everything have got an amazing campaign, and they talk about our access rider in it, called Just Ask. And it's exactly that. It's about people, promoters, venues, festivals, just asking, have you got any access requirements, as a standard part of the conversation. Because like you've just said, that's transformational, isn't it? Like for someone to just say, have you got any access requirements? And you to be able to imagine how much more comfortable you feel to be like, yeah, actually, if you could meet me half an hour before the gig, just to take me through A, B, and C, half an hour extra. Because it could be something as simple as that. Or like one of our blind musicians is like, I just need you to meet me an hour before. I need an hour extra time so you can take me around the venue and make sure like I'm comfortable where everything is. And that's it. It's literally that straightforward. That is, to me, if that was implemented across the industry, I think that would be a game changer. Sometimes I think people are scared about access requirements because they think, oh, people are going to be asking for.
Well, that's it. You think you're going to get immediate judgment, or you're going to get like sort of like, oh, he's getting like extra, whatever it is. You're getting something extra from what you're doing, and it's even when someone asks you, so how much do you charge? I mean, as a neurodivergent brain, it's just like, I don't know. I just want to play music, and I know I've got to do this business stuff. So you're already in that kind of psychological battle with those things, let alone, I mean, I've got to get the car right. I've got to get petrol. I've got to do, and you're doing all of these things. You turn up to a venue that's just like sensory overload, and you go into a green room with other musicians, and you're just like, I can't, I don't know how to do this. And then at the end of it, you're just so exhausted. Yeah. This is what I used to do touring, and then I've had to stop because I kind of just couldn't, I know other musicians, and again, who I was speaking to last night, he has someone who manages all of the logistics. So he goes in the taxi and then he goes here and everything as well. If you don't have that, then you're managing all those other areas. So when you come to the venue and you've got to then put on that mask to be able to communicate with the venue manager, communicate with the sound guy, and not come across as disconnected to everybody, and then having to go to a merch stand or whatever it is. It could be a music conference. It could be all of these things, to be able to start to break down those barriers and start to just feel yourself. It is incredibly transformative. And, I know that feeling of like, if I go and turn up in a room full of neurodivergent people, we're all going to turn up completely nervous. But as soon as we meet each other, it's like, wow, but that's amazing. That's amazing. So, and those things are starting to, how long's that been rolling out now for venues? And
like 2 years maybe is the access rider. We've got to do loads more work around it, to be honest. Eventually I want to do a campaign around it where we're like actively lobbying organizations, venues, festivals to do in a much more proactive way. Now we're doing it like as and when I'm having conversations with people or venues or festivals, I find out about it via our members. We've got this amazing member, Andrew Lansley, who proper pushes the access rider. He's brilliant and talking about its benefits. To be honest, he talks about it way better than I do. He's amazing, Andrew. So members will start doing it because they can see the benefits of it for other members to have that in place as well, not just for themselves. But we've got loads more ways to do on that, definitely. I'm really grateful to Attitude is Everything for including it in part of their training. Because obviously they do that specifically, don't they? Whereas, as we were saying in the beginning, my work's broader than just disability or neurodivergent. But in addition to that as well, because I always like to be like, right, we've got to practice what we preach. So I can't be asking organisations to do stuff. Because imagine them turning around and like, well, does the MU do this? And I'm like, no, it doesn't look very good, does it? So it's internally we're looking at like reviewing the processes, not just for members. So looking at our meetings, looking at what we ask members to do when they're looking for legal advice and assistance, for example. Working through that to make sure that's as accessible as possible as well. So taking out any unnecessary steps. So stuff like form filling, I struggle with loads. It's horrible, isn't it?
That's what I've been trying to fill in stuff. Like I think I mentioned to you about grants and stuff as well, music grants. And like I know there's others, help musicians and things as well, but then they've got like videos and stuff as well. But still, it's like there's a huge blockage even before I go and sign up to that application form of like, I'm going into a rabbit hole here and it's going to be incredibly stressful and anxiety because I'm like, because you just don't know, like, and also if you get a no, the massive rejection sort of stuff that
Yeah.
kicks in. So you're like, you want to do your best. But I suppose it's stuff like that. And like you said, with forms, with other things, whether it's policy, whether it's contracts, whether it's, there is so much that would just be skimmed.
Yeah.
And then you just don't know what you're signing up for, what you're getting. So
it's true. Or looking like, can we do this in a different format? Is there different ways we can do it? That's what we're really looking at. Because I'd hate to think that someone needed legal advice, let's say, and we sent them the forms to fill in, and they were like, I just can't cope with that on top of the situation that I need legal advice for as well. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll fill in a form, but when someone sends me a form, you might get this, I'll start sweating and already start thinking, oh my God.
Like, when I was doing the funds, I think after the crisis, and this was post-crisis as well, so I was like, in even more of a mess, but I was just like, I had to get all my financials or whatever it was. I was like, I just felt like I was, internally sinking.
It does feel like that completely.
And then you're like,
halfway through it,
I'll go and do something else. I've got to go and do this. I've got to go. I've got to go and iron my clothes. I never really iron my clothes, but
that's
it's just like
exactly what
the avoidant thing.
Even them forms that you fill in. This made me laugh to get an ADHD screening when you've got to get like. You fill like forms in about like your behaviours, don't you? And ask you questions about your behaviours, but you've got to write. So the questions, yes or no, obviously fine. It's not a problem. It's the boxes underneath that ask you to explain it. But it loads, and it was making me laugh that I was doing it, and then I was trying to find anything not to do it. But it was like, this is actually for your ADHD diagnosis, but your ADHD is stopping you actually doing the form.
A vicious cycle.
And I just remember keep writing on some of them. Can't remember. I've asked someone to say.
I've done that for the autistic ones. I was like, what? Like, it was 70 to 80 questions. I was just like, no, I don't know. Not sure. I'm like, I can't delve into that. My brain will not allow me to focus on that for, and what was I going to say? So with forms and everything as well, because I was learning something about visual learners and things, especially with the dyslexia. And I suppose that's what comes down with forms and things. I sometimes like those forms, and I don't know if you like this, where it's got one question per page.
Yeah.
Do you ever get on with those ones?
Yeah, because it's just so simple and straightforward, and you know what you're doing.
Yeah. If that was for every, and some of them cut out and they don't save, and that is incredibly frustrating when you've got to redo the whole thing. But that, it's like something like that, or it's more colorful. Because I was saying to someone the other day, with being a musician, when you go and learn a musical instrument, you are put, music's so colorful, but you're given notation which is black and white. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, this is why some can't read music properly. So it's the same with forms. You're giving something that's black and white that doesn't fit with a colorful brain.
Yeah.
And a visual brain. And so it is the same with, like, if there's forms, if there's some sort of thing that's like colorful, it's like animated, or it's gamification, or whatever it is that makes it feel like there's a dopamine hit by the end of this. And
you'll know this. It's like, like we said before, there's certain things that you're good at. So policy, if someone's asking me to research and write a policy, I love that. Because it's like, I know I get like, and that sounds like I'm a proper nerd, doesn't it? But I don't know. I love it because it's like, I wish you could switch hyper-focus on, but then at the times where I'll be like, right, and that's all I'll think about, and can like knock the policy out dead quick, because it's like, I love anything like that. But yeah, an application form that would be much simpler, because I don't need to do any research. It's just me answering the questions. Can take me forever. Will probably remain unfinished, to be quite honest, because I'll just be like, there's no way I'm getting through that. Like, it took me days to do that ADHD one. It was like, whoever designed this form probably hasn't got ADHD, have they?
I'm the same. I was like, why? What? This is so backward. Like, it's so backward. And I don't know if you've seen, you probably haven't, but the autistic one, so the ADHD one is, I can't remember how many pages it is.
It's not even that long, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's probably about like 20 questions or something like that.
And the autism one is 80 questions.
Wow.
And it's got big old like boxes for everything and stuff as well. And even my wife, who's got to fill out the other side of it, she's just like, this is ridiculous. Why is it geared towards like this? I'm like, if it had, like you said, a question every single page, one line, and I could be whatever, convoluted and things as well. Because there's a fear of like, hang on a minute, I'm filling an ADHD form here, but I want to be convoluted, but am I gonna, if I make it look like it's like professional, are they going to question? No, I'm not doing it. I'm like,
why is he doing this? So
shut
good?
down. It's just
But
like,
you, on the ADHD, when you get your, my partner, my boyfriend had to fill out one about my behaviours and stuff I'd said no to. He was like, yeah. Like it was saying,
really?
does he forget things all the time? And I put no to it. And he was like, are you joking? Like by the minute you're going to be, where's my phone? Where's my cards? Where's my keys? Like where you just leave them all around the house. There's things like that where you don't really clock at yourself, isn't it? But he did even say, he was like, God, like it's quite long, isn't it? It's the boxes underneath where it's like giving an example.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I feel like I could give you loads of examples, but then when I'm coming to actually do it, I can't think of one example that I can give you to support what I'm saying. But I had that where it's like, if I do this properly, are they going to think, why is he filming this 4 minutes? It's weird when you start questioning yourself, isn't it? And start
You're like,
thinking,
you've got 2 or 3 people, like you invisible people around you, just kind of like, oh, this, and this is why it's so. I remember trying to write dissertations or essays when I was at uni, and I just could never get started. And it was just like, oh, how, how do you do this? How do you just start to get the ball rolling and things? And that, I think, going through our conversation and obviously supporting musicians, I think it's all of those things that are holding us back from, because funding is a massive thing, obviously, in our industry. There's a lot of us why we drop off and we go into different careers. And some who I've met, older musicians who have gone into different career, like finance, wherever it is, and they've gone, I wish I didn't. I met one old guy and I was just kind of like, he said to me, I wish I did. And ever since I saw him, I was just like, right, no, I'm not jumping ship. I'm going to try and do whatever I can. But like, I'm doing things. I'm having to learn about marketing and sales and all this icky stuff that I'm a musician, but I'm having to learn all this, which is natural. But I feel there is blockages that are like, I can't sell to other people because it's just, there's a huge blockage there. And I feel those blockages are in, like you said, forms. So I need the money to be able to do a project, but it's almost like my brain's sabotaging itself because I can't fill in the form.
Yeah.
And it's like that, I think, is where a lot of us are just like, we're just suffering unnecessarily. And it's not unnecessarily with a neurodivergent brain. I just think, but what we're doing in these conversations, hopefully, and the more we're sort of awareness, and you're building a hub, which is an amazing thing. Because my goal with this was I want to build up a little community of neurodivergent musicians. But if it's all, and then it's geared towards the MU, neurodivergent hub, it all sounds like we're all like connecting together. And
I think that's one of our like inequalities in the music industry. One of our biggest things is there's loads of pockets of great work going on, but we're not connected enough about the great work. Like, don't get me wrong, the industry's got loads of issues, but there are people doing amazing work and making progress, but we don't necessarily know about them. So when we do start to join up like this, it's amazing, isn't it? Because it's like one feeds into the other, and you find out about someone doing this project over there that would really help you, and how can you replicate that? So that sharing and kind of building a community is something we want to do loads more of, definitely.
It's like your top music industry musicians who have brought out documentaries, obviously video documentaries and stuff, and talking about their mental health and everything as well. It does feel ever so slowly things are just starting to sort of connect. And especially, I mean, I know there's lines of working musician to the top whatever percentage of musicians who are out there doing the massive stuff. But I think just the more we're opening up about it, and obviously mental health can seep into other things in neurodiversity, and like you're talking about, I just, there's some musicians who would be like, no, I'm just going to carry on doing it and things like that. And that's like, well, fine, keep doing what you want to do. But I think the more we keep banging on the door, the more we just keep moving it as much as we can. I think it'd just be better for all of us. It would just give us a little bit of light. Just take off the weights. So, and then I feel as well, like if I can take off the weights, my music will be able to get better. My creativity will be able to flow a lot more without this crushing kind of weight that I've got to financially be dependent, for my family and all these other stuff. So it's, man, I think it's slowly like unlocking certain things. And I'm talking from like the chronicles of the journey from undiagnosed to diagnosed and all these other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, my convoluted way of talking.
No, I get exactly what you're saying. It is those extra. Well, they're not extra because you've got to do them, but it just feels like an extra thing, doesn't it? When you're not really doing the thing that you really want to do, because you've got to do A, B, C, D, E before you even get to do the thing that you want to do. And then there must be easier ways to do it, an easier way
to have
do
it.
it.
I think the key thing is with the hub, with other things that are going on, to know now that we have that support network.
Yeah.
That I think that's where we're like, you know, I can pop an email, or we can go and join a little group once a week, or whatever it is, because it's so niche. I can go and join a neurodivergent group, and I can obviously talk about personal life, but I'm like, this is really specific neurodivergent musician, or, you know, or the hub and stuff as well. Like, it's really geared to exactly, you know, like we're talking about Tristan, it's just like, you know, and I was like, he's geared exactly like ADHD and, you know, music industry. It's just like, oh, wow, what a perfect fit.
Perfect.
And that sort of thing, I think it's going to change, man. It's going to flip, and the snowball is going to go. So I suppose, I mean, recommendation or advice, I mean, we've gone through a lot of stuff anyway, but yeah, or final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Obviously, if you're a musician, I'd say join the MU, because where you are having problems getting reasonable adjustments or talking about access requirements, and that's just one part of the membership, they're all things that we can help you with. And obviously there's a whole other host of benefits, but in terms of this conversation, that's where I think we're particularly useful, because you know what it's like about being a freelancer, and you don't really want to raise your head above the parapet and say like, oh, this isn't working for me or whatever. That's what we're there for. So we can, when we're talking about that like collective action, we've got like a membership of over 33,000 musicians to be able to say, well, our members are telling us this, we need things to change. For me, that's a good, like, one of the best bits about belonging to a trade union. It's like, we are the voice on your behalf, so you're not going to suffer those consequences if we can have a industry-wide conversation and about certain aspects of musicians' lives. That's a really powerful thing, apart from like all the insurances and all the other like dead obvious things that you get. But the community and collective action elements of it, I think that's where the benefit is for me, being part of a trade union.
And I've got to say, I've been an MU member for, I don't know, since I feel like in the 2000s. I can't remember. It's been for a long time, but I never, it's one of those that, you know, it comes out of it and stuff. And it was like, okay, I've got the MU, but I'm not using, I'm not saying I'm using, I'm not making the most of the MU. And there's a lot of musicians, I think we've done it and things as well. But what I suppose, obviously joining the MU, what would you say to those ones who have been now existing members for so long, but they just, it's almost like they've forgotten it's there, or they're not actually using the service? Because I only started, you know, since the crisis, and I'm like, right, I've got to get in contact with the guys, and then actually it's opened up so many relationships, so many more communications. I'm like, what? Why have I just been suffering? And this thing's been cut, like, you know, I've had this here, this support network, but I've just been on my own. I feel, and that's a musician's mentality, isn't it? A lot, especially solo musicians. You're like, oh no, I'm on my own, got to do everything myself. I can't even get any advice. So
and you can get all the advice from us, and like, obviously if we don't know it, we've got like the lawyers and the legal team will be able to get you that specialized legal advice. But yeah, I don't know, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because people all join for a specific reason, usually, whether that's like if they need legal advice, they'll join because they're having an issue, or if they want the insurance, they'll join for that, or the PLI certificate, or whatever the benefit is that attracts them. And I think a lot of people join for that one thing, and that's it. And like you've just said, that's something you've done, but then we started emailing each other. I can't remember why now, but then it opened up a whole different conversation, didn't it? Which is how we've ended up here today. There's loads of ways you can get involved. So there's those networks. What if you belong to any of those groups, like LGBT, Black and Global Majority musicians, disabled or women musicians? I'd definitely join one of them and just come along and see what you think it's like. There's committees which aren't dead old fashioned, but they're way more interesting than like, because when you think of a trade union committee, I think there's a certain image that you think of it, isn't there?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not always like that, and they're interesting, and they'll be for like either regional committees or there's section committees. So for like education, recording and broadcasting, gigging, live musicians, theatre. So every sector of kind of the industry all come to conferences. Like the EDI conference was amazing. That was such a good conference. Full on, but good. And we've got another conference coming up in July. That's like our policy making conference, MU delegate conference. So there's tons of ways that you can get involved. But I would just say, even if you don't think it's something that we know about or we can help, I'd still just drop us a line to say, like, people contact me and go, do you know anyone who organises this for this group of musicians? And generally someone in our organisation will, and be able to put you in touch with them. Or if we don't know someone, we'll know someone that will be able to put you in touch with them.
Yeah.
So just even little things like that, like, again, it could make the difference.
I just thought I was asking questions. I was like, I'm thinking about, I want to maybe go and do this or another thing as well. And it's to bounce off certain things where you're like, you could be in Google or wherever it is, you could just be online for hours and hours and hours and hours because you're just like, I'm going down a rabbit hole here and I don't know really what I'm doing. Whereas you go and speak to yourselves and speak to professionals, and it's just like an instant email out, and you're like, oh my goodness, that was...
Well, like, you emailed me about research, I think it was, and Dilsey mentioned earlier, she's a professional researcher in music. So it's like, well, I won't know, but Diljit will know if research exists, or she'll know about it. So do you know what I mean? It's like, it's those things, isn't it? Because it'll take us, it takes me a minute to ask Diljit what you've asked me, and then she'll be able to go yeah or no. So yeah, I just always get in touch and ask us. And again, it's about building that relationship with us as well. I think people feel more comfortable about using the membership and getting the most out of it when you've had like an interaction with someone and it's been positive. Definitely.
And I think, especially that personalized, because, not that I didn't have it, I just don't think I ever inquired about it. And I think that's the thing as well. And just kind of like opening up those channels and be able to talking about it. And then obviously like this, like it's just led naturally onto things, and it will, build and build and build. And I'm kind of like, mate, like I've got so many musicians mates, I had one guy who injured his arm and things as well. And he knew I went through certain companies and things, and he's reached out and he's just like, mate, I didn't, I've been with signed up for years and years. I didn't even know this existed. I didn't know I could get this advice and stuff as well.
Make the most out of it, like your benefits, get your money's worth out of your membership. 100% I would. And then we've got all the range of like learning opportunities for you as well, and skill development. So there's all kinds like negotiating, tax, which obviously I would never go to a tax workshop, but I know for musicians it's super important.
I went to one. I think I went to one years and years ago. So
when I first started, I think it was in my first week, you were like, I'm going to see one of the workshops that we do, and it was a tax one. I was like, oh my God, I cannot sit through this. But because you're new in the job, you're just like sitting there. Worst nightmare. But I mean, I know it's super useful for musicians. I don't know, there's a whole range. So I would say check out all those opportunities, check out the network opportunities, and see what you think. And again, if there's something that you think, this would be really useful, then generally it's going to be useful to more musicians than just you. So you can drop your regional officer line with ideas for things that you like to see us doing. We won't always be able to do them, but it's definitely worth dropping.
You put it in a suggestion box or whatever, that sort of stuff as well.
Exactly, that, isn't it? And see what we can do with it. But yeah.
Amazing. Brilliant, John. Man, what a wonderful conversation. And such
thank you.
I think also we, as neurodivergents, we talk so fast, so we can condense it down to an hour, which is always an amazing thing. Or if we're out in a pub, it could be 3 hours of like different things. But mate, so wonderful to connect with you, on a face to face and stuff as well. And this I don't know when this episode will be out, but I'll be editing soon. But thank you so much, man.
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely. Actually, what a nice way to spend the afternoon. But let me know when it's out. I'd love to see it.
Definitely. Brilliant.
Nice one, John.
Cheers, fella. Have a great one. Cheers, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.